Bill, as ever, good to see you, my friend.
Wonderful to see you too, Raoul.
Luckily, we shared the chat that we had at the event in the MJM event in Vegas last week. So people have caught up a bit with what you've been up to on Chain Monkey. And obviously, everybody now knows your story on Real Vision. You're a big Real Vision personality. Everybody loves you. So what I wanted to do is, before we dig into some other stuff, I'd love to just get the update on Chain Monkey, that whole project, where you are, what's going on, because half the Real Vision team are invested in it now, and a part of it, and they
Wonderful to
all
know
love
that.
it. So
The project is actually still a very young project, but it has captured the imagination of many. And I think at the time that we were in Las Vegas at Takeover, the company was only 3 months old. We just had our 5-month anniversary. We have, many, many thousands of people in the community very actively engaged in Discord. And we obviously had the very first launch of the first NFT collection, which, just as a reminder, was the first ever in history all on-chain collection issued in a single click with one Ethereum transaction.
explain to people the significance of that. I know that some people may not have seen the interview that was aired last week, but just to explain to people the significance.
Sure. So, obviously the NFT world is full of all these beautiful, wonderful images. The images can, of course, be very large in size. Blockchains, which are a chain of blocks of information, typically do not have gigantic block sizes. So you've got to have pretty tight data structures embedded in those blocks, else you have to refer to the image somewhere else. So a lot of the earlier images that people would see were actually drawings or pieces of art that were stored on, say, like an Amazon server, and you would record the location, the IP address, on the blockchain so that you could find it. But what Danny Yang, who is the CEO of MetaGood and an incredible data scientist, did was he created a math equation that was a scalable vector graphics file. So with a little data table that determined rarity traits and a math expression that in a click renders or produces all of those things on the fly. So it was quite a technical achievement, and the experiment was done around a very simple looking graphic a design of the monkey. And that was our starting point. And I think because it was so innovative, it caught the attention of CoinDesk and a bunch of other people that talked about it, and it built a community very quickly. It actually was not intended initially to be our first NFT. The company MetaGood was, with the OnChain Monkey collection, was set up to do what the name implies, to be the source of all good, and to drive a set of communities that could instantly drive community and funding for projects that did good for this world. And we were, and still are, going to launch with some projects with the United Nations. But the technical capability of the team expressed in the OnChain Monkey caught everyone's imagination, and it took off. And since that time, we've had some wonderful community members that are professional Academy Award nominated artists join the community by buying a monkey, rev them up their own versions themselves. That was magical too. Community members saw what they were producing, and there were threads just asking those folks if they could be paid to do revs of everyone else's. Those artists joined the company. So we now have a second set coming. So the original OnChain Monkey is now referred to as the Genesis Collection. The follow-on is going to be called the Karma Collection. And in between those two, we came up with something very fun, which was something we called the Dessert Drop. So we created 3 types of NFTs: a popsicle, a donut, and a cake that you can acquire. Everyone was given one. Hopefully you got the one you wanted, but if you didn't, you could go off and buy one from someone else that had a different one if you got a donut and wanted a popsicle or whatever. And as you feed your monkey those desserts, it influences what will happen when you get the second monkey that is a derivative but souped up art piece from your original one. And the community's vibrant. The prices change all the time, but the popsicles, I think, trade for like $3,000 or $4,000. The donut in Ethereum, the donuts are probably $6,000 or $7,000. The cakes are about $250,000 now, and the monkeys themselves, they range in price. Probably $10,000 to $100,000 now per monkey. But it's been phenomenal, and the activities, obviously, I think we had just at the time in Las Vegas steered some of the proceeds to fuel the evacuation of Afghan girl out of Afghanistan to get her and her family away from the Taliban. And those kinds of things just continue. So I think, we've done some other work with the GigaConnect project from the United Nations and other things that are meaningful to people in this world.
So in your head, you start with the technology, and I want to talk about the technology in a bit, but you start with the technology. So then you start with the first group of NFTs, and then now there's the food, and then you go into the next phase. How does it map out in your head from here?
Ultimately, so what this is about, so I think I've mentioned in the past that venture capital used to be solely about funding products, things that people use, typically electronic things. And now we're given an amazing opportunity to fund the creation of microeconomies. So rather than just, a chip or a router or a hub or a switch, there are things like Roblox, which are, these insane communities around the world that gather online in these metaverses that are like virtual nations that have their own economies. And thus, with an economy, you have a currency. So to answer your question about what we will deploy within our community, one of the visions around this company is that currency is getting redefined. The nature of currency itself. The modern history of currency post World War II, kind of mechanization, industrial revolution, you had, of course, currency backed by a physical asset in gold. And that only lasted 28 years, from Bretton Woods until around 72 when it was taken off the gold standard. And then it became about nations storing a chit to preserve their economic future. They needed a way to store oil to run the machines, to run their economies. So we shifted to the petrodollar. And now that we're moving away from physical gold and barrels of oil to a world of electrons, there's an abstraction layer that can take it anywhere. And so as I look at currency, now I'm going to go back in time to the other 99.99% of human history. If you think of the many hundreds of thousands of years, X the 70 years that we've been on gold and oil, you could basically store value by doing a favor for another human being. You could create, you could be generative in creating karma, where if I did something nice for you, you stored that. I stored that value in you, and you might do something good for me, and you might actually feel good and do good things for two other people. So the unit economic of that currency was accretive and positive for this world. Now with modern digital technologies, we're able to encapsulate that into a token that is exchangeable. So I look at the OnChain Monkey community as the kind of the tip of the spear of the leading edge of bringing out this sort of humanity back, where there's a different form of currency that isn't tied to the second physical industrial revolution, and one that's a little bit more spiritual, where there's a release, an accretive release of positive energy within human communities. So back to your question about what do we do with this? Now that we've got this very, very engaged, vibrant tip of the spear core that is growing every day, we are going to eventually layer on a DAO of DAOs. So I'll abstract for a second to another economy that people may or may not have heard of, so I might have to explain them a little bit, but people have probably in this category heard about things like Axie Infinity, which is a game where it's a little bit like Pokemon cards. You have an Axie that has certain powers. You can put that card down digitally with 3 of them against another 3, and then you kind of, attack on points, and whoever is stronger value wins, and you earn currency along the way. You can breed the axes, create new ones, sell them. So that game has gotten so popular that people in that world make more money than they do in physical jobs. So they are literally quitting their jobs in many like developing nations to play Axie. And if you really want to make a lot of money, you have to have a good Axie. So if you're just entering the game, how do you come up with $500 or $1,000 as your entry chit? You may not have earned that yet. So there's another company, Yield Guild Group, YGG. Yield Guild Group basically is a DAO of DAOs.
Yeah, Gabby's been on Real Vision a few times.
Oh, he's wonderful. Yes. Yeah. He's an investor in MetaGood and OnChain Monkey. But as is Jiho from Axie. But the fabric now of YGG, obviously people can basically raise their hand, get a few friends, pool their capital, buy an Axie or set of Axies, and lend them out to someone else who, as they play and get money, peel 30% of that revenue off, 20% to the pool, 10% to YGG. So it's basically a DAO of DAO for collateralized lending. What we want to do with MetaGood is create a DAO of DAOs for the fueling and funding of anything. If you want to gather capital and fund the next cool Web3 startup with your friends, awesome. If you want to gather capital, fuel a charitable cause, awesome. If you want to do, an open source project, great. In that giant spider web of people, you're going to find other people that are interested, and the market vets the idea and determines the rates. It's kind of, it's like setting up the capital market system on top of what used to be North American forests that became America. You needed a Wall Street. So that will be the kind of the capital allocation, distribution, return system for a community that is pointed to do good things.
Wow. So the idea is to gather together a group of like-minded people that are civically minded for the community that they're part of, that want to do good, and then give them free rein to develop whatever projects they want together, be they charitable or be they capitalist exploits, but allow them, as long as it's for the good of the community and the community is happy that it's a good deed or worth doing. Is that kind of in line with where you think?
That's basically it. We're basically creating, the definition of a nation is kind of changing now, right? So I think, of course, during the mechanization of the world that led to World War I and World War II, and that the battle that Russia is still fighting, they're kind of fighting the old world battles. Outside of the period where the world was heavily militarized with machinery, the world was pretty different. There were kind of like tribal groups built around languages or religious beliefs or what have you. And there wasn't this kind of, the kind of thing that we're seeing Russia try to execute now on Ukraine. And I think cultures formed nations. And you had little nations like the Amish or, whatever, the Puritans or, what have you, the Lutherans. And so I think because we're in a world now where everyone's digitally connected in this giant fabric, a node can pop up and other nodes that are like it can be connected in a layer that's sort of an overlay or a subgroup that lifts out and communicates. And we're trying to define that around a set of people that really authentically want to do good for other people and the world.
The cryptoverse is an incredibly exciting place, and it's going to be absolutely massive. This has been just a small taste of my own personal journey into crypto. Join me for free over on realvision.com/crypto as we discover just what this new world will look like and much more.